Hello and welcome back to my channel. That is if you're a returning viewer. Welcome to my channel if you're a first time viewer. So what are we going to be looking at today? We're going to be looking at Thunderstruck by Lrson. So this book is a non-fiction book, and it basically details two very different men who were contemporaries of each other and who their paths crossed, so to speak, in a very dramatic way. So what's it all about? As I said, it talks about two men. First of all, there's the story of Guglielmo Marconi. He is the inventor who basically developed wireless communication. He didn't invent it, but he developed it, and he made long-distance wireless communication possible. And the book talks about his quest to make wireless communication, long-distance communication possible. And it also talks about his life, his family, his business relationships, and so on. And it's pretty interesting. The other individual it talks about is Dr. Hawley Harvey Crippen. Both men are famous, but for very different reasons. Marconi as an inventor, Dr. Hawley Harvey Crippen as a murderer. He is one of the most notorious murderers, British murderers, of the 20th century. He went to the gallows in 1910 for apparently murdering his wife. So basically, two parallel stories taking place at the same time, and the author does a very good job of intertwining the two stories together. Because at first, obviously at face value, you would think, well, what have they got in common? Nothing really. But he manages to weave the book together, bouncing from one to the other in a seamless way, and it's very interesting. It's very well written. There's a great deal, you can learn a great deal, not only about the scientific stuff, about the wireless communication, but just society in general, how society functioned, attitudes at the time. Marconi was Italian, and attitudes towards Italians in British society. You get a really nice glimpse of Victorian London and life in general in that period. So Marconi himself was a very troubled character, and that is discussed very nicely in the book. Full disclosure, I knew nothing about him before I read this, and he's an interesting character, and the author really does a good job of bringing him to life. In the case of Crippen, for me was much more well known. He had a waxwork in Madame Tussauds. So Crippen is a name I heard growing up, when I was a child, 10 years ago, and the bare bones of his story are pretty well known. He had a wife who was 10 years younger than him. She was a loud, boisterous, bullying kind of woman, a heavy drinker, and she had aspirations to be a stage star, although not the talent to back it up. And she was very demanding of him. He did everything he could to make her happy. He wasn't a rich man, but she spent his money like water. And he was a very unhappy individual, very lonely. And he finally found a woman he did love, his secretary, a young woman called Ethel de Neve. And so, things were carrying on in that vein until after one particular evening, his wife disappeared. His wife, Cora Turner, was her maiden name, Cora Crippen, her married name. And his wife disappeared. And when her friends began asking questions about, where's Cora gone, Crippen's answers, at first they were fairly convincing, but then he started to contradict himself, and then the police got involved. The police came to do an investigation, and at that point they didn't really suspect murder. But Crippen panicked, and he and Ethel de Neve made a run for it on a boat to Canada. And of course, once they did that kind of aroused the suspicions of the police a great deal more, as it would. There was a more thorough search of his premises. There'd been others in the past, and they found human remains under the floor in his coal cellar. And of course, the remains were examined. They determined that they were the remains of his wife, and that was it. How are the two stories connected? They're connected because it was thanks to Marconi's invention that the police and the captain of the ship that Crippen was on were able to stay in contact, And it was thanks to Marconi's invention that Crippen and Ethel Deneuve didn't get away into Canada. Had they done that, Crippen would have been scot-free, home free, safe. So it's an interesting story. I found the story of Crippen in particular to be very, very tragic. I don't know whether he killed his wife or not. More about that in a minute. And I'm not justifying murder, but he does come across as being a sad, tragic figure. I knew before I even put this book up that Crippen was hanged. But even so, while I was reading it towards the end, I was kind of rooting for him to get away. I mean, I did feel sorry for him. And I did feel sorry for him getting caught really at the last moment. Regarding whether he really was a murderer or not, there have been recent DNA tests on surviving samples of the murder victim found under his coal cellar. And the people who did the research claim that it's male DNA. So, of course, that would preclude it being Cora. So there seems to be some controversy about whether Crippen really was a murderer or not. Crippen went to the hangman protesting his innocence. He never confessed. But there was other evidence at the time that could support the idea that the remains were Cora Crippen. So, and also the research that's been done on the remains, some people have questioned that. Some people have said that, well, it could easily have been contaminated, etc., etc. So there's no decisive answer, but there does seem to be some doubt, at least, as to Crippen's guilt. Whatever the facts of the matter was, he was hanged in 1910 at Pentonville Prison. Ethel Deneuve was found not guilty. She was found not to be involved at all in the whole thing. And Cora Crippen, we don't know. So anyway, that's basically what this book's about. I hope I've piqued your interest in this. It's not really what I've really said is not really a spoiler, because I mean it's well known. I think that Crippen, was hanged among people who are interested in this kind of thing. So I hope that's not too spoilerish. But even so, it's well worth reading the book anyway, because it's a fascinating book, and I've only just skimmed the surface of what there is to learn in here and what there is to read. It's really, really entertaining, really interesting. As a side note, some of you are probably thinking, hiding a murder victim under the floor of your coal cellar? Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's a rookie mistake. You never hide your victims on your own property. That is not something that I've ever done. I mean, not something that I would ever do, and it's not something I would recommend or condone. Some of you might be thinking, yeah, what's the big deal? I hide bodies under my kitchen floor, my coal cellar floor, in my fridge, in my wardrobe. And you know what? I'm not judging you, okay? I'm really not. I mean, the important thing is that you you subscribe, you continue following my videos. As long as you do that, we're good, okay? So that's all there is for now. See you in the next video. Goodbye.